I don't have a problem with Kawhi regretting it, but why don't we look at Kawhi? Why are we looking at Paul George? Paul George missed about 24 games last year. Kawhi Leonard missed about 15, if I remember correctly. The cohesiveness that they needed to establish wasn't quite there. Paul George has an excuse, though. He was coming off an injury. Kawhi Leonard was all about load management. He practiced when he wanted to. He played when he wanted to. He came out of the games when he wanted to. He had the complete support of management and ownership. And more importantly than that, when you're that superstar, two-time champion, a two-time NBA Finals MVP, particularly when you make the demands that he's made, private jets and everything else in between, being the prima donna that he came across as being, at least according to numerous sources in the league, the bottom line is that you got to be the one to be able to step up. No matter what struggles Paul George had, and I'm not here to deny that those struggles existed, because he averaged less in points in the postseason than he did in the regular season, less from the field, less from three-point range. All of those things are true, absolutely, positively so. And I'll get into Paul George in a little bit in terms of what he had to say about Doc Rivers. But I will tell you this, that didn't stop the Clippers from being up 3-1. Now, on many, many occasions, myself, you, and everybody else included, when LeBron got swept, what did we say? You couldn't get one game? You had my man imitating me on Instagram. One game? One game? You couldn't win one game? Excuse me, that's what we were looking for from LeBron. How come we can't look for that from Kawhi Leonard? You up 3-1. Paul George, no matter what happened with the Clippers, no matter what his struggles were, it didn't stop you from getting past the first round. It didn't stop you from going up 3-1 in the second round. So how come I can't look at my two-time champion, who's a two-time NBA Finals MVP, who's got all of these requirements and all of these demands for his services? The Clippers didn't want to give up all those damn picks for Paul George, but Kawhi said, either you get him or I'm not coming. So if all of that's being the case, how come I can't rely on Kawhi to get me one game? One. So you can get to the conference finals for the first time in franchise history. He couldn't do that? That's what I'm looking at. So I don't want to hear about Paul George. I'm not saying your breakdown, I'm not saying your basketball breakdown was wrong, because I'm not challenging that. Paul George did and did not do what happened, and that's a fact. All I'm saying is, at the end, who caused all of that to happen? The guy that wanted it all, and you couldn't give me one game. What's up with that?
If you want to argue that Kawhi showed up small in Game 7, in the second half of a Game 7 that they needed to win, you're right. And I'm not absolving Kawhi. Well, because especially in the second half of a Game 7, I expect, okay, Kawhi is going to turn it on. Mm-hmm. I get it, but especially late in the game, I'm expecting him to turn it on. It's normally what he does. He didn't. I'm not absolving him of blame, right? It's his job to try to carry the team. But Stephen A., let's be honest. Like, Kawhi's regular season numbers, they went up in the postseason. He was better in the postseason than he was in the regular season. He was very good in the regular season. He was great in the regular season. Even better in the playoffs. If Paul George would have played at Kawhi Leonard level, they would have been in the second round. Okay. If Paul George played at normal regular season Paul George levels, they would have been a real challenge for the Lakers in the conference finals. He didn't. So to say Kawhi needed to compensate is a fair point, but it's Paul George who went away. He went away not just for one game, not just for a game they needed, not uncharacteristically in the second half, in the fourth quarter of a Game 7. I don't give Kawhi a pass on that, and I didn't on this show. But that's very different from just being a regular player in the playoffs. That's why Kawhi should regret it. Stephen A., you mentioned all the favoritism shown by Kawhi. What's the reporting? And you would know this better than I do. What's the reporting? That the team resented it about Kawhi? No, not that the team resented it about Kawhi. They resented it about Paul George, because they know an MVP caliber player, when they see one, they see Kawhi, they go, we get it. They see Paul George, they go, not him. He shouldn't get that same treatment. And Paul George deserves that based on his play in the playoffs.
Time out. Do you respect Steve Ballmer?
Yeah.
Do you respect Lawrence Frank?
Yep.
Do you respect Doc Rivers, who was the head coach at the time?
I do.
I respect the hell out of those guys. I respect them, and I like them. And I respect the hell out of the Clippers organization. And we certainly have to respect their intelligence. Max Kellerman, do they give up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and a slew of draft picks, including 5 first-round picks in the future? What team on earth do you know would give up all of that unless Kawhi insisted. You do this or else. They would not. Let me tell you something. If Kawhi Leonard, listen, if Kawhi Leonard had said, if you don't do this, I'm staying in Toronto, Clippers wouldn't have done it. They did it because he threatened he would go to the Lakers. He threatened he would go to the Lakers. So understand what he did. He had them mortgage their damn future just to get Paul George. Now, you have pointed out how Paul George's numbers, even though he averaged 28 in the playoffs the previous season, not this past postseason, but the previous postseason, you knew, I knew, that Paul George was a little less than himself in the postseason than he was in the regular season. And still, Kawhi Leonard sat up there and forced the Clippers to make that move. So I put more of the onus on him than anybody.
Okay, wait, Stephen A., about that we agree. But he didn't force them to make the move. They chose. They looked at it and they said, slew of 5 first-round picks, whatever it is, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari. Yeah. We can't just look at it that we're trading it for Paul George. We have to look at it we're trading for Kawhi and Paul George, because otherwise we get nothing.
You were in Cali.
So from that point of view,
you worked out here, Max. They were the Clippers. They didn't have a choice once he was threatening to go to the Lakers. You know that.
Well, yeah, they could do. But listen, they still chose to do it. But my point is, the question is, should Kawhi have regrets about teaming with PG-13? Kawhi could have picked someone else. He could have said Chris Paul or someone else, right? He chose Paul George, and he could have made them make that trade. He chose Paul George, and he should regret it.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.